listening to the IELTS podcast. Learn from tutors and ex-examiners who are masters of IELTS preparation. Your host, Ben Worthington.
Hello there, IELTS students. We're going to focus on the IELTS Listening Exam today, and we're going to really zoom in on a feature called connected speech. Once you understand connected speech, you'll understand why sometimes English speakers can just literally sound like a block of sound with a few random words that you might recognize, and you'll start to transform that block of sound into words, into meaning, and comprehending the whole block of sound that you've just heard. Now, this is not only going to help you with your listening and comprehension skills, but it should help you with your spoken English as well. At the very least, make you more aware. Now, just one last thing, the beauty of this is once you recognize it, it sort of like unlocks a lot. So as I was saying, blocks of sound, they start to become comprehensible. And this is incredibly valuable for your listening exam. If this is your first time ever in your life of hearing my voice, well, lucky you. You've just found one of the best resources available for you to pass your IELTS exam. My name is Ben Worthington. I'm from the UK, from the north, and that's why certain words might sound a bit strange. And I'm going to explain that a little bit more in the middle of this tutorial. I started IELTS podcast around 2012, and I started it because I wanted to focus on helping IELTS students, because quite simply, IELTS students have ambition. Working with ambitious students is so much more rewarding. It's so much more fulfilling. You know, they're going places. They've got a goal. The results can be measured. It's just from any tutor that's worth their salt, they want their students to improve. But when I started with this IELTS topic, I was so lost. I was so confused. I could help with the speaking somewhat just by having experience teaching English. But the real difficulties, the exam skills, the time preparation, the planning an essay, the reading skills, the listening skills, all of this was just so overwhelming. I was completely lost. So I decided to go out and seek the best experts on this topic I could find. I recorded my conversations with them, and then I released them as IELTS podcast, tested it on my students. If it worked, it went into my online courses. And fast forward to today, that's why we are one of the most popular sites online. We've got the best courses, and we're offering you tools, because smart students nowadays are using tools more than information to pass the exam. Tools such as the byebyehumanienglishtutor.com site we're launching, only available for laptop users at the moment. We've launched the AI essay checker. Things are moving forward, and most of these tools are free for you. So you just need to go to IELTSPodcast.com and you'll find those resources there. Let's jump into it. So this tutorial, we're going to cover connected speech for the listening exam. I'm going to explain what connected speech. I'm going to give you some practical examples. Then we're going to go into a little bit of theory, using some big new words that were new for even myself. And then I'm going to look at common issues, and then we'll focus on different accents, on how you're going to come across connected speech in those accents. And then I'll just give you some practical advice for helping you improve your listening skills. And also, a lot of this tutorial is going to be also valuable for your speaking skills. And I've got a little anecdote about that later on. So what is connected speech? Well, basically, it refers to the way that sounds, words, and phrases are almost like mushed, pushed, and they kind of flow together. This is what happens when somebody gets excited and they're very competent with the language. And this is why, like I said right at the start, the sentence they're speaking or the paragraph just sounds like one block of sound. Now, I vividly remember one student, he had like a couple of classes with me. And then on the fourth class, I was like, "Hey, how are you doing today, mate?" And he's like, his eyes just lit up and he's just like, what? And I was like, what happened? And he's like, "I can understand you. I can understand what you're saying," because for years it had just been a block of sound. And the reason why he understood me was because I have kind of reduced the amount of connected speech I do. And that's why a lot of people find it, the way I speak, very clear. And that's why it's kind of humiliating, but to English people, I don't sound as English as the standard everyday person because I'm enunciating. What does that mean? It means I'm pronouncing every single syllable in every single word. Now, the problem is that most people, especially native English speakers, will not do this because it's not entirely natural for them to do it, which goes back to what I was saying about the fourth time now, why a lot of English can just sound like a block of sound. Now, interestingly, this happens across most languages. In Spain, down in the south, oh my word, they don't just connect words, they connect entire books and then add that to the speed in which they speak, and it is so frustrating. But it's like a radio station. Once you tune in, and after a couple of minutes you can start breaking it down and understanding. It just takes a while. And to speed up, being aware of connected speech will help you speed up the process because you'll have an idea what's going on. So let me give you some practical examples of when you're going to hear connected speech. I'm gonna. Okay, this is so typical with American English. I'm gonna instead of I am going to. Okay, the to sound has been elided and reduced. Another example, could have, is often pushed into a contraction, I could have. Okay, and even some English speakers will write I could have with an OF. I could have gone there if I wanted to, not knowing that it is a brutal grammar mistake and obviously should not be used. Also, the H gets drop for the V, and this is what's called blending. It's blended in with the preceding word. I could have, and this is where the phrase coulda, shoulda, woulda. I could have, I should have, I would have. Okay, coulda, shoulda, woulda. Right. What are you doing? How does that get shortened? Well, in informal speech, we'll say, what you doing? Okay, especially very common among Americans. What you doing? And this is why when I'm teaching a speaking student, when I'm preparing a student for the IELTS exam and they're using this, it's not too bad, but I prefer them to say I'm going to, because when you pronounce it fully and you're not using these sloppy, it's almost sloppy connected speech in some cases, a native English speaker can get away with it, but it's often a little bit 50-50 with a non-native English speaker because there's usually the native accent underneath the English, and then they're using connected speech, which isn't entirely perfect either. So we get these sort of like two negatives, and it can sometimes interfere with what is being communicated. So that's why I recommend students just to avoid it, or at the very minimum be aware of it and maybe even pronounce it slower. But I still think I'm going to is far more, what's the word? It's far more beneficial for you as a non-native English speaker. Next one, in order to. Okay, when spoken quickly, the phrase in order to is often pronounced as in order to, with the final R blending with the preceding vowel sound, which is the to. It is. Okay, this can often be pronounced as it is. Okay, with the T sounding it, blending with the following is, it is. Okay, that's not a difficult one. And then again, the modal verb could. Could you, in formal English, will get shortened to could you. Could you give us a cup of tea, love? As we'd say in my neighbourhood, in my region. Now, let's look at the technicalities of this. We've got consonant assimilation. This occurs when a consonant sound in a word adopts the characteristics of the next sound. So in the phrase handbag, this will often sound like handbag, with the M being sort of like interjected in there because the D following the B produces an M. It's kind of strange, actually. We've got handbag. So as I speak, which is enunciated in most cases, handbag, but even then you can hear a small M. And if I'm speaking informally, could you pass us the handbag, please? The D is reduced to an M. So if a student's not aware of this and they're not aware of the context, they could be thinking, why does he want a bag of ham in his living room, for example? All right, so handbag. That's the difference. And this is why when most native English speakers, most learners of English, when they finally get to England, they realize nobody here speaks like the way they've been taught. It's incredibly infuriating, and they've got to start, not all over again, but they have to start relearning. This happened with my wife. She went back to her own country. She comes back, and she'd met with my dad, picked up the kid, and then she's telling me, she's like, he told me something about Zente, our kid's name, about Zente's sleep schedule, but I didn't understand a word. And I was like, what? And she's like, yeah, I think it's just because I've been out of the neighbourhood, out of England, out of the region, our specific region. My dad's obviously got quite a heavy accent. But she's like, I couldn't understand a word, and I felt embarrassed about asking for clarification. So it's one of those typical situations which you're probably aware of, where you're just speaking with someone and you're just nodding and smiling to be polite. And I've been myself in that situation with an Irish speaker. Me and my friend, we just didn't understand a word, and that's a group of native English speakers not understanding each other. We kept on having to ask him to clarify, and then in the end it just got too awkward, so we were just stood there smiling, and he realized, I saw in his eye, he realized we didn't understand. Anyway, next one, consonant elision. Wow. This involves the omission or reduction of consonant sounds. So in the phrase next time, the T sound is often elided and we get a K. So if I'm speaking with a friend or family, I'll say next time, make sure you do it correctly. Yeah, next time. I'm not going to say next time. The Queen would, if she were alive. The King will. They're brought up in a I wouldn't even say they're brought up in England. They're brought up in a completely different world because they never ever interact with the English people. Hence them speaking like no other English people do. Hardly. Anyway, let's move on. I don't want to get started on the royal family. So just one last thing. It's useful, it's valuable for you to be aware of this when you do start interacting and speaking with English speakers, and especially on the listening exam. Next one, consonant linking. This occurs when the final consonant sound blends with the initial vowel of the next word. This one's probably the most common. This one is probably the reason, and I think this happens in a lot of languages. So, for example, she is an engineer. All of those would get mushed together, and we get she's an engineer. Okay, instead of she is an engineer, she's an engineer. And it's all together, and it sounds like one block of sound. But if you use your skills of being aware of this, of the context, and you're just familiar with grammar structures, and you know that it's actually she is an engineer, then it becomes far, far easier to start understanding. The next one, consonant sound variations. You don't have to learn them all, but it's useful to learn the most common ones. So these variations include the voiced and voiceless distinction, the aspiration, and the flip tap consonants. For example, the voiced and voiceless ones would be the S or the Z, the aspiration, P, in pin, and then spin, where it's not as aspirated, and then the flap tap consonants. For example, better is often pronounced with the D, so it might be better. Okay, then these will help you, once you get a better understanding of these, they'll help you understand how English is spoken in a natural way, and especially in a fluent way. So you don't have to, as I was saying before, you don't really have to incorporate this into your spoken English, especially if you're trying to force it. It's far more beneficial if you just let it happen naturally. However, being aware of this will definitely help you understand listening or understand spoken English, and especially the listening exam will become a little bit easier. So what are some common issues? Well, word reduction. As we said, words like to, have, are, and often get reduced. Especially in my neighbourhood in Yorkshire, but I'm not going to go into that. I've got a whole section prepared for that. Then linking sounds, as we've said, you kind of bridge the words together. It can sound a little bit easier on the ears. It sounds more natural. However, it's definitely more challenging to pull out those individual words. Now, the next one I find quite interesting. These are intrusive sounds. These are like they're called additional phonetic elements that are inserted in certain words when they're spoken together. For example, if we have the phrase law and order, the and in that phrase will typically end with a vowel sound, and the following word, order, begins with a vowel sound. So in connected speech, what we're going to hear is an R. So you're going to hear probably law and order. Okay? And that's in connected speech, but an R has just come out of nowhere if you write that down, you would be tempted to put an R in there if you weren't aware of the phrase, law and order. However, if you don't speak with connected speech and you enunciate like I've been doing, you will hear law and order. But if I'm speaking with friends or family, there's no way I would say law and order. My friends would rip me to shreds and my family would find it rather pretentious. So there is a time and place for when you want to speak, when you want to enunciate for clarity, and when you want to sound natural. I know in the exam, you want to be on the more formal side. As I've said in other tutorials, treat it like a job interview. You don't want to be so relaxed. You say, I'm going to go to Cyprus next year. No, I'm going to go to Cyprus next year. Now then, final section, connected speech in different accents. And this will help you with your preparation, getting aware of various different accents. Some people say that the English have lost control of the English language. We've got all of these speakers. I think it's amazing. But we've got all of these speakers from around the world, Americans, Canadians, Indians, Vietnamese, all of them using the English language every single minute of the day. And of course, it's no longer in our control. Big deal, no problem. So, anyway, some examples of connected speech in different accents. In Yorkshire, where I'm from, I often say I'm from near Manchester. My village is actually nearer Manchester than the capital of Yorkshire. However, I'm from Yorkshire, not Lancashire. So in the Yorkshire accent, it's quite distinctive. There's vowel shifts and consonant articulations. So, for example, the word book or scone, it's longer, whereas in other parts of the UK, they would say book, or they'd say scone, or they would say bus instead of bus. So there's these small differences, and this impacts, these idiosyncrasies, they impact the rhythm and flow of connected speech in Yorkshire. And this goes back to what I was saying about my wife not understanding a single word my dad said to her the other day. Now, in Australian English and American English, they've got their own sets of accent-specific traits. So, Australian accents, which sounds very similar to the south of England, and this is because the first settlers, the first European settlers in Australia were basically prisoners from the south of England, and that's why it sounds very similar. So they've got a rising intonation and a tendency towards vowel reduction. You right, mate? G'day, mate, for example. Whereas in American accents, they've got, not only do they have quite a lot of regional variations, someone from New Orleans is not going to speak the same from somebody from from New York. But what they tend to do is they draw out the vowels. I'm not going to do the American accent. I won't hurt your ears with that. But this is obviously largely due to the different European settlers that have settled in the United States. So just getting familiar with them, with all these different nuances of the English language, is going to help you, because you've got no idea which accent you're going to hear on your listening exam. Now, some final pieces of advice to help you improve your listening skills and recognize connected speech. The first one, this is just a good life skill, but to listen actively. Pay attention when somebody is actually speaking to you. Don't let your mind wander to, what am I going to eat today? For example. Okay, what's for lunch? Pay pay attention when they're speaking. One useful technique I used when I was learning Spanish was just try to visualize the words as they were spoken. So I'm there and I'm trying to see the words that they're saying to me. It took me a while to do this, but it got easier the more I did it, and the more I did it, the more I understood when somebody was talking to me. Now, a very powerful technique to improve your listening skills is to transcribe and analyze. I love this piece of advice, because you're going to learn new vocabulary. You're going to learn the perfect pronunciation of it the first time you come across it. You're going to hear it in a natural environment, in context, compared to just memorizing lists. So it's incredibly powerful. It is time consuming. It is mentally tiring. But doing this, you're going to come across, as I said, new vocabulary. You're going to get a good introduction how connected speech works in reality. Come across new new grammar structures, and also, if you, depending on how far you want to take it, you can also just pause, repeat what you heard, and try and integrate it, incorporate it into your everyday speech. Now, when you are doing this transcription and analyzing, you want to just make sure you're listening to authentic native English speakers. This might sound a little bit controversial, but it's better to just listen to from the horse's mouth, as we say, rather than somebody who's learnt English. The reason is obviously because it's just going to sound more natural. There'd be very, very few grammar mistakes. In theory, there should be none, but if you ever listen to somebody speaking English, you will hear the occasional grammar mistake. I've committed one already in this episode. If you did hear it, good for you. Next one, obviously practice your pronunciation. We've got a ton of technology available now. Just the very bare bones basic. Record yourself, listen, compare it to what you're trying to imitate. And that's it. That's it. Hopefully this will have helped you with your listening skills. And just doing something today, like listening to this tutorial, will have increased your chances as well. So good luck with the IELTS exam. Keep moving forward. If you're stuck, then just go to IELTSPodcast.com. There you'll see a whole ton of resources. Sign up. You'll get invitations to use the AI essay checker. When you upgrade to that one, you get faster feedback. No, it's actually slower because they're measuring more data points, but it's more detailed. But it's the fastest way to improve. You just focus on your weak spots, do some research, do some practice, resubmit the essay, and get in that positive feedback loop. One last thing before we finish. I don't charge for these tutorials, so if you did find it valuable, please share it with your friends. I would greatly appreciate it. It helps us grow, helps us get better, give us feedback. Big thanks for listening. Keep moving forward. You will get there in the end, and good luck in your IELTS exam.
Thanks for listening to IELTSPodcast.com.